All right, jumping right into this deep dive today, we're looking at something you sent over about workplace gaslighting.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, as an article from a website all about autism awareness. And it's
Mhm.
an important one for sure. I mean, especially when you think about the unemployment and the underemployment rates we see for autistic adults.
Yeah,
They're capable, but those numbers are just awful.
absolutely. It's
Yeah.
it's something we talk about a lot, right? Like we see these statistics,
Right.
but we need to understand why.
Exactly.
And that's where gaslighting comes in, and it's disturbing.
It really is. And you know
Yeah.
what really got me in this article was that they talked about this whole like gaslighting playbook that some employers use, and it was chilling.
Yeah.
So maybe to start us off, can you just give us a breakdown of what exactly gaslighting is and how it shows up at work?
Sure. So gaslighting, basically, it's all about psychological manipulation, right?
Okay.
It's trying to make someone doubt themselves,
Yeah.
doubt their sanity, their perceptions, their memories, even their grip on reality.
Right.
And when you put that in a workplace setting where you're dealing with, deadlines and your performance and all these relationships,
Right.
it gets really damaging for anyone, but especially for someone on the autism spectrum,
Right.
because
Oh,
they're already trying to navigate a world that
yeah.
doesn't really get them or accommodate them.
That's so true. And you know that playbook analogy really stuck with me. Like it's scary to think about it that way.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through some of the tactics? What are some things that people should watch out for?
So like imagine this, okay? You're given like super clear instructions for a new project right from your boss.
Okay.
Maybe there's a deadline you get to work. You're putting in all this energy,
Uh-huh.
and then your boss just denies ever saying anything.
Oh no.
And you're like, wait, did I make this up? Did I imagine this whole thing?
Right.
And that's how they make you doubt yourself and your reliability.
Yeah, it's like you're always walking on eggshells.
Yeah,
Never sure if you're doing the right thing.
right.
You would think that just getting things in writing would solve that problem.
Wait, you would.
Yeah.
But that's where another tactic comes in.
What's that?
They just don't do anything in writing.
Really?
Yeah. So they can always say, well, I never said that. There's no proof.
Oh gosh.
It's all vague. And if you're like, hey, can we get this in writing? They say you're being too rigid or inflexible or not a team player.
Oh wow. So they're using communication itself as like a weapon.
Pretty much.
It seems like they're setting you up to fail.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's what happens a lot. They'll keep changing the expectations too.
Oh gosh.
So just when you think you know what they want, they move the goalposts.
Yeah.
And then if you ask for clarification, they just ignore you.
It's just awful. Why would any employer do that? What's the point?
Well, sometimes it's because they don't want to be held accountable.
Oh, so if there's no record,
Right.
they can just say whatever.
It becomes a he said, she said.
Right, right.
And other times they just want to discredit the employee, especially if that employee is like raising concerns or trying to, stand up for themselves.
So if they make you look bad,
Yeah.
then your concerns don't matter.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then the worst part is sometimes they're just trying to get the employee to quit
Really?
so they don't have to actually fire them.
Wow. It's all manipulation.
It is.
So to think that they would actually use someone's autism against them, it's just,
Yeah, it's awful.
it's awful.
Like you get frustrated,
Right.
right? You stress out. They're like, oh, look, they're being too emotional.
Right.
Or, your neurology might make you need things spelled out and they're like, they're being pedantic.
Yeah.
And then if you're like, hey, can you clarify this? And they're, oh, you're being rude.
Yeah.
Or confrontational. They just keep undermining you.
So it's like they take the things that make you different
Yeah.
and use them against you instead of
Yes.
seeing them as strengths.
Right.
So if you're in that kind of situation, what can you even do? What would you recommend?
The first thing is you have to realize what's happening. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, if you're always second guessing yourself,
Yeah.
that's a red flag.
Okay. But how do you prove it's happening? Especially if they're not putting anything in writing.
Right. Well, that's why you have to start documenting everything.
Okay. So it's,
Let's say your boss gives you instructions verbally.
mm-hmm.
You send them an email summarizing the conversation and say, just confirming our discussion about this. I'll have it done by this date.
Yeah.
Please let me know if I'm understanding this correctly.
So you create a record,
Exactly.
even if they don't want one.
Right.
What if they just refuse to use email?
Or they ignore you.
Yeah.
Then you have to be a little more assertive, but always stay calm and professional. Just say, hey, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I need this in writing so I can stay organized and meet your expectations.
Okay, so you're kind of using their tactics against them.
Yeah.
You're making them be clear.
Yeah.
What other advice do you have?
Set boundaries. So if your boss keeps changing things last minute, just politely ask for confirmation in writing every time
Gotcha.
and get some support.
Yeah.
Talk to a coworker, a friend, a therapist, someone who can just listen and tell you you're not crazy.
That validation is so important.
It is.
What about HR or a union rep?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable talking to them, they might be able to help you out.
So you're not alone.
Nope. You have rights, and you don't have to put up with this.
It's good to hear.
Seeking help is not a weakness. It can actually be really powerful.
Absolutely. And it can help you feel safer at work.
Yeah.
It can help you take back some of that control.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so important, right? Having those options and not feeling stuck. And it makes me think about that 85% unemployment rate for autistic adults.
Yeah.
It's like you can't help but connect that to gaslighting in the workplace.
Oh, for sure. There's definitely a connection.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about, like, bigger issues, too. You know, it's like when this kind of thing is happening all over, it really scares autistic people from even saying they're autistic.
Right.
Because they're afraid it'll be used against them.
Exactly. And it keeps those stereotypes alive.
Right. And then it's just this cycle of being left out.
So they're basically punished for being themselves.
Pretty much.
And then what about accommodations?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know that part of this too?
Totally.
Yeah.
So when gaslighting is just like the normal thing,
Yeah, okay.
it makes it really hard to get reasonable accommodations.
Does.
Because it's seen as like special treatment or a pain.
Right.
The focus becomes all about making things difficult for you
Right.
instead of helping you do your best work.
Like they're saying your autism is a problem.
Yeah.
Not something that can be good for the company.
Exactly.
So far we've talked a lot about the problem of gaslighting,
Mm-hmm.
how it works, and how it hurts autistic people at work. But this article also made me think about like the bigger picture, you know,
Yeah.
the systems that let this kind of abuse happen. What are your thoughts on that?
That's such an important point. It's not enough to just give people tools to deal with gaslighting.
Mm-hmm.
We have to change the whole system. And that starts with changing how we talk about neurodiversity.
Yeah, I love that. Changing the narrative.
Right. Because right now it's seen as a bad thing, like something to fix or hide.
Right.
But how can we start celebrating it instead? Seeing it as a strength that can actually make workplaces better.
That's what I'm talking about. So what can employers do?
Well, they need to educate themselves
About
the strengths and challenges that autistic people bring.
Right.
We got to get rid of those harmful stereotypes and create a culture where people understand and care about each other.
That reminds me of communication, which
Right.
is like the main thing in gaslighting.
Yeah.
What can employers do to make communication more inclusive and supportive?
The most important thing is to be clear and consistent.
Okay.
Like give instructions in writing, have regular check-ins, and be open to questions.
So people feel safe asking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Without feeling judged.
It's about building trust.
Exactly. Making sure everyone feels heard and respected no matter how they communicate.
And that brings us back to gaslighting, right?
Yeah.
When communication breaks down, that's when it can happen.
Totally. It's like when there's no clarity or respect,
Mm.
that's when those manipulative tactics can really start.
It feels like it's about power, too, right?
Absolute.
And how those power imbalances can be even worse when you're talking about neurodiversity.
Yeah, because autistic people are already trying to navigate a world that's not made for them.
Right.
So they might be more vulnerable to manipulation.
That's such a good point. So
Yeah.
we need to create workplaces where power is shared,
Right.
where everyone has a say.
And where differences are valued.
Exactly. Leveling the playing field.
Mm.
So we've talked about employers, but what about autistic people themselves? What advice do you have for someone who's dealing with this kind of stuff at work?
The first thing is just remember you're not alone.
Yeah.
There are so many autistic people out there who've
Yeah.
been through this,
Right.
who've come out stronger, and who are doing amazing things.
That's good to hear.
It is. Find those communities, those support groups,
Online too, right?
yeah, online forums where you can connect with people who get it.
Yeah, because that shared experience can be really powerful.
It is.
What about self-advocacy? What if you're afraid to speak up?
That's tough, but it's so important. Self-advocacy is a skill,
Mm-hmm.
and like any skill it takes, practice.
Okay.
Start small. Pick one or two things you need help with.
Okay.
Practice what you want to say, write it down if that helps. And then go to your boss or supervisor and be calm and assertive.
So not aggressive, but not backing down either.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You have the right to ask for accommodations that help you do your job.
That's so important.
It is. It's not about special treatment. It's about fairness.
Everyone has different needs.
Right.
And meeting those needs is how we make a workplace truly inclusive.
Exactly.
This has been so helpful. We've talked about so much.
We have.
From gaslighting tactics to how to make workplaces better. Before we finish up, I want to go back to something we talked about before.
Okay.
The amazing things that autistic people bring to work. It's so important to remember that because even with all these challenges,
Right.
there's so much talent and potential out there.
Absolutely. Their perspectives, their attention to detail, their problem-solving skills,
Yeah.
these are all things that any workplace would be lucky to have.
It's about seeing those differences as strengths,
Exactly.
as things that can make companies more successful.
That's what it's all about.
It's not just about doing the right thing.
Mm.
It's about creating a workplace where everyone can do their best.
And where everyone benefits.
That's a great way to put it. So it's not just the right thing to do, it makes good business sense.
Exactly.
I'm curious from your experience, what are some of the biggest myths about autism in the workplace? You know, the things that get in the way of real inclusion.
Well, one that I hear all the time is that autistic people aren't good at socializing or working in teams.
Yeah.
Which is just not true.
Yeah.
Some autistic people do prefer to work alone, but plenty of them are amazing in teams.
Right.
They bring fresh ideas, and they're great problem solvers. It's about appreciating those differences instead of trying to make everyone fit in the same box.
Yeah, exactly. Creating a space where everyone feels comfortable being themselves.
Right.
I feel like communication is a big part of this too.
It is.
So for employers who really want to make communication more inclusive, what can they do?
It starts with being open and honest.
Yeah.
Encourage people to share how they like to communicate,
Yeah.
whether it's through writing or talking, face-to-face or video calls. And then be willing to adapt your own style to meet everyone's needs.
It's about flexibility.
Exactly. There's no one right way to communicate.
Right.
What works for one person might not work for another. And be patient, too.
Okay.
Some autistic people need a little more time to process information.
Right.
Or they might communicate differently than what you're used to. Just listen, ask questions, and make sure everyone feels heard.
It's about creating that safe space.
It is.
Where people aren't afraid to be themselves.
Exactly.
And that kind of ties back to gaslighting, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Because when communication breaks down, when there's no clarity or respect, that's when manipulation can happen.
Totally. A workplace where gaslighting happens is a workplace where communication has failed. It's all about power imbalances.
Yeah.
Where there's no empathy and people are made to feel small.
It's about power, for sure. And it feels like those power differences can be even stronger when you're talking about neurodiversity.
Yeah.
Because autistic people are already dealing with a world that doesn't always get them.
Right.
So they might be more vulnerable to this kind of thing.
Exactly.
So we need workplaces where everyone has power.
Yeah.
Where everyone has a voice and where differences are respected.
Exactly.
So we've talked about what employers can do. What about autistic people themselves? What advice do you have for someone who's going through this at work?
First thing, remember, you are not alone. There are so many other autistic people who've been there.
Yeah.
Who've faced these same challenges and come out on top.
That's good to hear.
It is. Find those communities, support groups, online forums, where you can connect with people who understand what you're going through.
Because sharing those experiences can be so helpful.
It really can. And don't be afraid to speak up for yourself.
Self-advocacy.
Yeah. It's a skill, and it takes practice.
Right.
So start small. Think about one or two things you need help with.
Okay.
Practice what you want to say. Maybe write it down, and then talk to your boss or supervisor. Be calm. Be assertive.
So not aggressive, but not afraid to ask for what you need.
Exactly. You have the right to ask for accommodations that help you do your job well. It's not about special treatment. It's about fairness.
Leveling the playing field.
Exactly.
We've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
From the sneaky ways gaslighting works to how we can build better workplaces for everyone. As we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a sense of hope.
Yeah.
What are some of the positive things you're seeing happen? What makes you hopeful for the future?
What gives me hope is seeing more and more people understanding what neurodiversity really means. More companies are starting to see the value of autistic employees.
That's great.
They're realizing that a diverse workforce is a strong workforce.
Yeah.
And we're seeing more autistic people becoming leaders themselves, speaking out and changing things.
So it's about changing the story.
It is.
From focusing on what's wrong to celebrating the strengths of neurodiversity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about creating a world where everyone has the chance to succeed.
No matter how their brain works.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful goal. And I think we can get there if we keep working together.
I agree.
If we keep learning, keep challenging ourselves, and keep fighting for a more just and inclusive world.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's been a really eye-opening conversation.
It
And to our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing for a world where everyone can thrive.